All right, so welcome back to a normal kind of power rankings. I will not be doing the analytics this time. The reality is, so I'm traveling this week with Chris for Christmas and everything. I just don't have the time to do the whole analytical power rankings video. I know a lot of people like that, and I was kind of disappointed because I like making it as well. But then I thought, well, what if I just, do something a little bit different this week? Let's just do my own opinions on these power rankings. It takes way less time to do, so I can afford to get this out. Should mention, we might be getting this week a little bit less film studies, a little bit more of these kind of, unique videos. I'm going to try to still get a decent amount of film studies out, but just, had to cut some things for time this week. So one of them was the analytical power rankings, but let's just do a regular power rankings. I think this could be actually fun, so you can kind of get inside my head a little and understand how I feel about these teams. The reality is, doing a power rankings like this week by week, it's a little bit tough. I feel like, I respect the people who do it, but doing it like once now that we kind of know where the teams are, I think makes more sense. So let's just get into it. Okay, so right off the bat, as you see here, so we have, first things first, you're going to notice that there's kind of these little gaps, and the gaps is tier gaps. So basically, there's three different tiers you see on the screen right now. There's the bottom tier, which is just the bad teams. Then there's kind of the middle tier, which I feel like is, not necessarily just completely bad. Like, they're competent, but they're not great. And then the tier above, that's kind of the teams that have won games, but I still don't think are very good. So that's where I have them at. So yeah, from bottom to top, Jaguars 32 makes sense. I mean, they've been a bad team. They're the worst team in football. I think they've earned this 32 ranking. And again, nothing's really gone well for them. Number 31, the Lions. Lions have won some games. You could flip the Jets or Lions. I'm not really too concerned on like that. You could certainly argue either way. But, Lions did at least beat the Cardinals. That's something, although the Jets have won some impressive games themselves. I think both of these two teams have shown good coaching. I mean, Dan Campbell, I've kind of made some jokes about everyone jumps on the Dan Campbell is a good coach train immediately, and I was kind of like, well, let's see what happens. But I think that we actually have seen some good stuff coaching-wise these past few weeks. And Robert Saleh as well. I mean, you could say everything good you want to say about Campbell, you could say about Robert Saleh. He's motivating his team as well. I think he's doing the best he can with really a talent-depleted roster. Neither of these guys have great talent, but they're both doing their best. The Texans, another team, not a ton of talent here, but they found a way to win. How about Davis Mills? Who would have thought that Davis Mills would have been one of the best rookie quarterbacks of this season? So again, what's his ceiling? I don't know, but at least he's shown he can be an NFL quarterback. Next tier is so we have the Panthers at 28, and you could argue dropping them a tier if you wanted to, because they're kind of in the middle of, they've shown some flashes, and they have had good moments, but they've had some really bad ones as well. Their offense can't get it together. The reality is, it's just hard to win without a quarterback. Especially hard to win when your receiving core isn't playing well, and even more difficult to win when, your superstar running back in Christian McCaffrey struggles to stay healthy. So it's been a tough go for the Panthers. Defense has looked solid, although, again, it's not looking as great now, but part of that, I just wonder, is when your offense isn't doing anything, it just makes the defense look worse. Number 27, the Giants are, I think, a disappointing team. I thought they'd be maybe a little better than this. I didn't think they'd be great, but better than this. Their defense has certainly not been very impressive this year. I think it was due for some regression, but more regression than we expected. I didn't think it had a great game against Dallas. And again, offenses look solid at times. The weapons have just struggled to stay healthy. Losing your starting quarterback, that's going to make things worse. And number 26, the Chicago Bears. Again, there's things to like about all three of these teams. That's why I have them in this tier. There's been stuff I've liked about the Bears. I think Justin Fields has certainly shown flashes. And I think that, Bears offensive line's underrated, I think. I think it's a solid offensive line. Darnell Mooney has played well. Allen Robinson's been a disappointment. So still not the best receiving core by any means. But you at least have some flashes and maybe a core you can build around. And, front seven is still very good, although they need some secondary help. Next two teams, the Atlanta Falcons really are kind of like Cordero Patterson, Kyle Pitts, and Matt Ryan, and that's it. I think that they've done what they can with their talent. I've actually liked what I've seen from Arthur Smith. It's kind of one of those things where, Robert Saleh and Dan Campbell get all the credit because they've taken bad rosters and had them win some games, whereas, Arthur Smith's probably overperformed more than either of those guys. So I think that the Falcons should be, there's optimism for Atlanta, but it's a rebuilding season for them, I think. Number 24, I have the Steelers here. I still don't think the Steelers are very good. I know a lot of people think the Steelers are better than I do. I don't know how this team keeps finding ways to win games. It seems like they don't play well on offense, and they don't cover well either. So it's like they're good at like one thing, and that's their front seven, and somehow that's going to get them maybe a 500 record, which is wild to me. I still don't think the Steelers are great, but listen, you can't argue with winning. They keep winning, and a big chunk of why they're good is because they have just a superstar head coach in Mike Tomlin. He means so much to this team, and he's going to get this team to win 8 games kicking and screaming. He's going to find a way to do it. Okay, so next little grouping here. So that bottom tier, this is kind of a tier, it's similar to the last tier. I'm going to call them like teams that I like but just aren't complete enough, I think is fair to say. Because Seattle at 23, they have stuff that I like about them, obviously. Russell Wilson, although he hasn't had his best year. They obviously have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I'd still like to see them have a good third option on offense. And, there's some issues defensively as well. And I think the biggest issue might just be coaching in that aspect, because Seattle, they do a lot well, but they do some things very poorly as well. So they need to clean up those mistakes, basically. Clean up those issues in this offseason. And you could say similar things with the Raiders. Like, their defense was much improved. That's very cool to see. But how good is their defense still at this point? It's still not, like, fantastic, but it's good, which is nice to see. But, again, offense has had some trouble. And without Darren Waller and without Henry Ruggs, like, they can't get guys open. Like, it's really that simple. They need to have guys open if you're going to have success. Look at Tom Brady against the Saints. No one's open. They score no points. Like, you got to get guys open if you're going to throw the ball. And, when you're kind of an offensive built team, it's tough. So that's why I have them there. The next tier is kind of the teams that I don't think are great. And maybe you could even argue that some of these teams are better than, are worse than like the Raiders. Although kind of part of the way I viewed this is not just how good are you, but what are your chances of winning a Super Bowl? Who has the best chance of winning a Super Bowl is kind of the way I viewed this a little bit. And, for teams like this, they're all teams that I think if they reach their ceiling could be really good, is the way I think I would view this tier. This is has a potential high ceiling. So like Washington, their offense has struggled. It has. But if they could get to a competent offense, their defense has played a lot better as of late. And again, this sort of, Ron Rivera going away from what he's typically used to. He's doing the right thing, making good adjustments, Ron Rivera has. So, that's something that I find fascinating. But again, I wouldn't bet on it necessarily. Like, same thing with the Dolphins. Okay, Brian Flores, if he can continue to scheme stuff up, that would certainly make things, very good. And then if Tua continues to play this, solid level, doesn't turn the ball over like he did last week, I could see a theoretically high ceiling. But again, how likely is that to happen? The Broncos are interesting because, maybe they don't fully fit in this tier just in terms of the, how high is their ceiling, but they have a low floor type thing. But I still feel like, okay, we've seen this Broncos team look very impressive at times. We've seen their defense be able to shut down the Chargers, right? So we've seen them look very impressive defensively at times. It's also had its bad moments. The flip side for the Broncos is, their offense, I feel like at times has also looked very good, but it just hasn't been consistent enough. Number 18, now the New Orleans Saints. Saints are a team where defense is electric. I still just have concerns about their offense. I do. Again, when they're playing the Buccaneers and shutting the Buccaneers out, okay, it looks great, but they own the Buccaneers. Since Jameis has gone down, they have really struggled. They haven't looked like that same team again. So, yes, they've beaten some good teams. They've beaten the Patriots. They've beaten the Buccaneers twice now. They've beaten the Packers. I mean, that's really impressive. However, only the Buccaneers wins. They didn't have Winston for. And that's just my concern is the quarterback play. I think it's a fair concern to have. So that's why they're a little bit lower. Next two, these are the teams that, again, I feel like I see how they could go on a run here. I can put that into my head. For the Eagles, it's stay with the running game and hope no team just drops back and plays coverage against Jalen Hurts because he does really well against the blitz. He does that. I can see this team get hot. The number 16 now, the Minnesota Vikings. If they just throw the ball a lot, they don't kind of do the opposite of the Eagles. They, get more of a pass-heavy offense. I could see them having success. And again, if their defense sort of, is when it lost to the Lions, they had some injuries. If they stay healthy during the playoffs, there's some hope there as well. So I could see it, But again, these teams haven't shown me enough consistently for me to put them too much higher on this list. Okay, so next tier, there's only 2 tiers left. It's the championship contenders tier and the tier of teams I could still see winning a Super Bowl, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on them to win the Super Bowl. Like, I'd be mildly surprised if they won a Super Bowl, but not shocked. And the reality is, I had such a hard time putting these in order. Like you could argue any of them go any specific spot. I think there's a reason why I did these tiers, because it really helps you see kind of how I feel about these teams. So yes, the Ravens are 15 and the Titans are 9, but if the Ravens are playing the Titans next week, I'm like, either one could win. Like, that's really how I feel about them. So for Baltimore, I feel like they just have too many season-ending injuries. It's the way I view it. So, like, okay, you'll probably get Lamar back, so that's not too concerning. But all the injuries on defense, their secondary is just so depleted. You saw it in that Green Bay Packers game. It's just tough. So I think, I think Baltimore, when healthy, very good team. They're not healthy. Number 14, you have the Cleveland Browns, who, again, I could easily be talking them being better. I really like their secondary, so I think that they kind of had the opposite thing with Baltimore. But why they're lower is just I haven't seen enough consistency of their offense. Their offense was supposed to be loaded and awesome this year, and a lot of it has been Mayfield and him not living up to expectations, but it hasn't been as loaded and awesome. We'll see Nick Mullins tonight. We'll see how that goes. Number 13, you have the Cincinnati Bengals here. So Bengals are interesting. Joe Burrow's been fantastic. He's really played well these past few weeks. That's another thing. So Burrow's very good. I know he leads the league in interceptions. Burrow is very good. And, Jamar Chase is very good. But we did see when Denver took Jamar Chase out of the game with doubling him a good amount, kind of tough. Makes the offense a little bit more difficult to have success there. So that's another aspect. But again, their defense has been very inconsistent. But when they're at their height of their powers, they can beat anybody. I just want to see that a bit more often. Number 12, the 49ers. I had the hardest time placing the 49ers on this list out of any other team because, you look at their season-long stats, and they're not that impressive, but the issue is they were so banged up the first half of the season, then they played really well the second half of the season. So, typically I would say, okay, well, there's inconsistency there, so I'd kind of dock you for that. But it's not really inconsistency because they were injured, and they played really well since getting healthy. So I think they're a very good team. I decided to go with them at 12 here. I think that they're still a little bit below the Colts, Chargers, and Titans for me. But at the same time, I don't know. Like, I certainly wouldn't feel strongly about if they played the Chargers, who would win. I don't know. So that's why I kind of say these are all in the same tier. Number 11, we have the Indianapolis Colts here, who, Colts, they know what they can do well, and they do that very well. They run the football incredibly well, and Jonathan Taylor gets all the credit. I get it. The offensive line's pass blocking fantastic on top of it. So you got to give them credit. They're a well-oiled machine here. Carson Wentz, I feel like has been played fine. I know he only had 5 completions in a win. Doesn't happen too often. It seems like only in Patriots games that happens. But, the offense is still playing well, and the defense has been inconsistent, but offense wins football games in the NFL, especially when it's a running offense. So when the temperature gets low and teams start running the ball more, that's actually going to be a benefit to them, not a bad thing. Number 10, I have the Chargers. They're another team where they're inconsistent. They have some issues. I've talked about how they can't throw the ball over the middle. They do everything else very well, but over the middle throws is where they've struggled. But they do everything else so well on offense. Their passing attack has been fantastic. So I like that. I like how Brandon Staley goes for them 4th down. I think it makes sense. I think that it's the correct decision to do that stuff. So I'm a fan of that. Their defense has a little bit of issues. It does. I mean, it just does. The running game isn't what it wanted to be, but this is kind of a rebuilding season for the Chargers. So for them to have this good of a season as a rebuild, they have so much cap space next year. They're a really fascinating team to see where they go from here, and they're still a good team now. Number 9, the Titans are another team where I think that they're a tough team to evaluate as well because they haven't looked great since Derrick Henry has gone out. Their offense hasn't looked great. Their defense has still played well, but their offense has clearly taken a big hit, and it's not just Henry, but it's their entire offense basically. You also lose AJ Green and Julio Jones. But the flip side is Well, when you get those guys back, you'll start playing well. So they're another big wild card team for me, where I wouldn't be shocked to see them win the Super Bowl. Like, I think that's totally in the cards. Also, wouldn't be shocked for them to have a first round exit. So that's why I put them here at 9. I think either one is totally possible. It just kind of depends on how healthy are they once the postseason comes around. And all right, final tier. These are the championship contending tiers. And yes, I have the Bills in this tier. Fight me on it if you want to. I think the Bills are still very good. I know that they have now a bunch of losses on their resume. They have 6 losses on their resume. I still think they're good. They've been inconsistent. The reality is their offense really is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs just trying to will it to victory. But there's worse offenses in the league than that. Like, that can absolutely work. And I think the reason why you have to dock them is that Tre'Davious White injury. I mean, that sucks. That makes their team not as good. Because with Tre'Davious White, I think they could have been a legitimate, top tier championship contender here. That's definitely a tough thing, because you look at their overall season stats, they're currently second in net points per drive, which basically means okay, your offense gets a drive, your defense gets a drive. How many points are you up by on average? They're second best in football in that. So, there's a lot to like about the Buffalo Bills. There is some stuff to dislike, though, which is why I have them here in this tier, but they're at the bottom of this tier. Number 7, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe I'm wrong. I think the Cowboys defense is getting a little bit overhyped. It's played well. It's played very well. It's 7th in defensive points per drive given up. So that's good. That's very good. But again, when we're talking about these teams, I think a lot of people would say, well, Cardinals-Cowboys, the Cowboys have the defensive edge. The Cardinals defense has played better over the year than the Cowboys defense has. However, the Cowboys defense has played better these past couple of weeks. So is it recency bias, or is it Dallas is actually just playing well down the stretch and have gotten better? Maybe a little bit of both. I think a little bit of both. So I think the real issue with Dallas and why I can't put them higher than 7 is their offense is just, as Jerry Jones himself said, it's in a slump. So they need to get out of that slump a little bit, because they have weapons, and there's definitely a lot of potential for this team. So there's no bad teams here once you get to the top 8. I do have the Arizona Cardinals ahead here at 6. I think the Cardinals they've been disappointing these past couple of weeks, and I'm starting to get worried about their defense, even though I just talked about it being better than the Cowboys over the season. But these past couple of weeks have been tough, and it makes me worried that a good offense can come to town and do some damage. And the real issue with the Cardinals is they need DeAndre Hopkins, and I don't know the extent of his injury. He's hopefully going to be back by the playoffs, but if he's not, and if he's not 100%, that's a real concern for Arizona. So they're another team where their ceiling is winning a Super Bowl. I do believe that. I think every team on this list, ceiling is winning a Super Bowl. That's why they're the Super Bowl contenders. But I do see some red flags potentially. Number 5, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. They're a fascinating team. Their offense has really sputtered. I still don't think Mahomes has played fantastic. Once you take away all that deep stuff that he used to be able to just live with, they've kind of struggled. They get underneath stuff. They finally got it done, though, in that Chargers game, and their defense is actually playing really well. So you got those two things on top of each other. That's why I have them as a top 5 team in football. I think they're the second best team in the AFC. Let's go to number 4 now. I'm going to go with the Rams here. And I was kind of surprising myself when I put them here, but I don't know. I just like what I've seen out of the Rams. I think that Odell Beckham Jr. does add something to this team. I think Von Miller adds something to this team. That's why you go out and make those moves and get those players. I still think they have a very good defense, and their offense has looked unbeatable at times. It's just, again, there's been some consistency issues. So really 4 through 7, there's almost another tier within a tier of you could argue kind of either of those 4. Even now as I'm talking about it, I'm almost should Dallas be number 4? Maybe. I don't know. Again, I think what's more interesting to me is which tier do you have these teams in, as opposed to what actual spot do you have these teams in. But of course, that's not how people view it. People are going to say, how could you have my favorite team lower than this other team? You're stupid and dumb and clearly biased. That's just the way it goes. But, that's part of the fun of this as well. All right, top 3. Number 3, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, listen, not a great week against the Saints. That wasn't very good. I still think they are a good team, and again, they're not going to be missing Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin too much longer, at least we hope. I haven't seen any updates on Mike Evans' injury. I heard Chris Godwin, it's an MCL, which is actually better than an ACL injury, because basically the way you think about it is an ACL, I'll use my finger. So like an ACL, you use it like that's how your foot usually goes, and the ACL is the ligament that makes your foot go forward, whereas the MCL is the one that makes it kind of go side to side. It doesn't really go, your legs don't really go side to side that often, so it heals easier. That's my not a doctor understanding of how this works. So the good thing is that, and I've had an MCL injury in the past when I ran cross country. So, it's not fun, but it isn't as bad as an ACL, that's for sure. And it's not a tear, it's a strain. So hopefully he gets better for the playoffs. Hopefully he just, feels better, first of all. But then obviously, the football side of things, hopefully their offense can really be healthy, which it hasn't been for all season. I mean, this is a team that, it's weird, they haven't had any massive injuries that's taken them out for the whole season, but they have had a lot of these 3 to 4 week injuries, these 6 to 8 week injuries. They've had a lot of those, and so hopefully they get healthy come postseason time. But then again, it's football. No one's really ever fully healthy outside of week 1, and even then, there's usually some injuries. So I don't know. Number 2, I do have the New England Patriots here at number 2. I know that they lost to the Colts. I still think they're a very good team. I still have them as the number 2 team in football. As I mentioned, they are currently the team that, leads the league in net points per drive. So, they run the ball very effectively. Mac Jones, I think, is still very good. I know a couple interceptions against the Colts. I still think he's very good. And this defense has looked electric. The one way you can beat them is run the ball and run the ball effectively. That is kind of the pathway to victory. But as I kind of like to say, listen, when teams are trying to run the ball against you, you're winning. You want teams to have to run the ball against you, although they run the ball against other teams. So it's interesting. I kind of would maybe like to see the Patriots be a bit more aggressive, quite frankly. I actually think that despite the fact that I think Bill Belichick is leading the league in Coach of the Year, he's the leading odds better in Coach of the Year. I don't know if I would agree with that. I actually think that in some ways he's holding the offense back a little bit, and maybe you could just say that's Josh McDaniels. But regardless, the coaching staff on offense I think could be a little better, but on defense it's obviously incredible. So it goes both ways. Number 1, I have the Green Bay Packers here at number 1. And it's interesting about the Packers. I do think that they deserve to be favorites. They've won the games they've supposed to win. They were supposed to win. I think that they deserved this one spot. They ran the ball very well. They, have been playing very good defense despite being banged up. They have a lot of guys that should be coming back. And on top of this, they have a quarterback who's maybe MVP in Aaron Rodgers. You could certainly make that argument. The Packers, you look at their net points per drive, they're currently 9th, so they're not that spectacular there. An element of that, though, is they've had a couple bad games. And I think, the Saints game on their record, that kind of skews the stats a little bit. And the reality is, you think about this, if the Packers play the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game, do we feel strongly one way or the other? Me, personally, I don't. I think that's a total coin flip game that could go either way. I think I give a slight edge to Green Bay, which is why I have them at number 1, especially because they have the bye week. And, who knows if it'll be the Buccaneers? I mean, who knows if it'll be the Packers? Maybe it'll be Cardinals, Cowboys. And, would we be shocked if that happened? Not really, because there's a lot of good teams, in both of these conferences. I think that these are the 8. There's 5 in the NFC and there's 3 in the AFC. I feel pretty strongly about that. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.